pretty much on that. So our topic today is homosexuality in the Hebrew Bible, and we're going to look at that because this is a controversial subject that comes up, and we want to kind of examine it and think what has been said about it in the past and how it has been dealt with and how we're going to deal with it, etc., as part of African Israel. The Mishnah says, Rabbi Judah said, an unmarried man must not tend cattle, nor may two unmarried men sleep together under the same cover. But the sages permitted it. The Gemara says, what is the reason? And said they to Rabbi Judah, Israel are not suspected of either pederasty or bestiality. This is according to the Babli Talmud, Kedushin 82a. So I want to take your view over here because this is an interactive section, and I want to take your view. What's your view on this homosexuality? What do you feel? Lay down on the ground. What do you think about it? Are you for it or are you against it? And if you're for it, then why are you against it? Okay. Okay. Why? Okay. Can I ask if you're against it? Why are you against it?
Well, personally, I don't feel it's right. Really.
Okay. All right. Is that a religious view or is that a personal view?
I'd say for me, that's a personal view. Really.
Okay. Anybody else?
I think I'm not into it.
Okay.
Right? But I think if we're told not to do certain things,
right,
we might be, amongst our groups, there might be inclinations given to us.
Right.
Maybe not us per se, but amongst the Hebrew people,
right,
for them to defeat, or to deal with. So,
okay.
I think it is what it is. It's been there since before we came about.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have to.
Okay. All right.
That's it.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I say as far as procreation.
Yeah.
I mean, how would you procreate?
Right. So your view is that it's a procreation issue, homosexuality. Okay. So let me now present the case as I would anyway. the scripturally really, I mean, we only have. I would suggest that we really only have 2 verses in the whole of the Torah that talk about anything to do with, if you are going to say homosexuality. Only 2 verses. So for instance, to give you an idea, in Vayikra, Leviticus 18:22, it says that you shall not lie with mankind as with womankind. Then in Leviticus 20:13, it says, if a man lie with mankind as with womankind, both of them have committed a detestable act according to some translations, and they shall surely be put to death, their blood shall be upon them. And then after that, we really, other than the inferences and the other references that talk about sodomy, we really have nothing else to go on. So if you went by the Torah, I find it quite incredible that since everybody is opposed to it, because I feel that it's not a personal view, it's a religious view, if I'll be honest. It's a religious view. It was a view that I was brought up with as well, that homosexuality is wrong, but I've actually come to look at it, examine it, and find that it wasn't a personal view, it was a religious conviction, that it's wrong, it's detestable, it's this, it's that, and the other. But having said that, I have seen other people, people sometimes are born with, deformities. For instance, a male can be born with female parts, body parts, or a male can have deformities in which his genitals are not formed properly. So what tends to happen is those people end up going outside the community because they cannot marry as normal people do, and they cannot do nothing as normal people. They become outcasts and the black sheep. So I think that we need to re-examine this view, because what you're doing and what I was doing in ignorance before was taking a religious view. But I'm going to challenge the religious view next. I'm challenging what I call a stereotype. Why? Because who creates human beings? And my first question is, who creates humanity? Do we create it? Is it the mother and father that creates it? Or is it an involvement of an outside force? Everybody will say, I don't think anybody's going to even try to say it's other than God. So Yahweh creates, right? So if Yahweh creates, then why does Yahweh create somebody's genitals as maybe a female genital? Maybe they are malformed. Why does He do that? Have you ever thought about this? So if God has created that act, if God is the ultimate authority, then we have to question is that He gave you 2 verses which are misunderstood at best. How come He didn't give us 10 or 12 or 15 verses? So when God tells us that we've got to obey the Sabbath, how many times is that quoted in the Hebrew Bible? Hundreds of times, right? If you just look at it, and it's repeated, word after word after word. Almost every second, third chapter is mentioned Sabbath. Sabbath this, Sabbath that. Sabbath is a contract. You must keep the Sabbath. You broke the Sabbath. How many times Sabbath is mentioned? Because to God, Sabbath was very important. But how many times is homosexuality mentioned? Twice. So that should raise up alarm.
Well, when you, like you said, when I thought about it, and we're not in a position to judge a person
right.
on their preference.
Right.
I personally believe that it destroys the male
right.
image.
Sure.
That's why it's kind of like it's shamed upon men to do it, and it's not shamed upon women to do it.
Right.
And it does kind of. And from what I've seen, it does damage like the authority.
Right.
Whereas
right.
a man is looked at as
right.
like just less powerful in an environment that we already looked at right now in this day and time as women
right.
being the head and us
sure.
being the tail.
Sure. That's understandable.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, but I don't feel that we're in a position though, if a person does
right.
want to do that, to tell them, well, it's wrong. Or
right.
To do it, all we can do is go by what.
Well, let me set up a precedence. Let me put a baseline for argument's sake. If I said the baseline was that Israelites don't do that, then we talk about goyim. What about the goyim? Should they do that or should they not do that? So in other words, so we're saying let's set up a precedence for argument's sake. We say baseline, Israelites don't perform any homosexual acts, but goyim, let's talk about the goyim. And we know that goyim do it all over the place. It's nothing new. It's been practiced for thousands of years. Even prior to the creation of Israel, it was present. So my first question is this: is that when you are going to condemn an homosexual, you're going to have to act out a judgment against that person, as it happens in Islamic world. When they find a homosexual, they stone him or they kill him or they do something. That means you're going to take a life. So in Islam, it's not just a matter of opinion. It's serious. They will kill somebody for it. Even if they practice it, even if Muslims have a practice of it hidden, they will still kill somebody if they found out that somebody is homosexual, in acts, or even if it was insinuated, and somebody said, oh, he's homosexual, and before you know it, that man is, being dragged in the streets, and there's a mob, and there's mob justice. So it will kill that person, more than likely and justly.
What about the ones that you might say, I've always felt like a woman.
Right.
And then they'll go and have an operation.
Right.
And going.
That's going the extra mile. That's like somebody who's a transvestite, and that we can look at that too. That's a good question. What we see is that some people who feel like they're a woman, not a man, and they feel they're more inclined that way than this way, and then they have the operation. Again, I'm going to say that we're not in a position to judge people. And definitely in America, in our side, to say we can do something about it. We can't. can do nothing about it. Somebody decides to become a woman from a man, as that's what they feel, then that's what they get. A bit like some of the famous stars that did it here. And so therefore, like there was one famous guy here in England, not in England, in America that did it. Jenner, right. So the thing is that, you can't change that. So my question is not so much that's a separate issue. My question is who created that person? Did I create that person? Did society create him? Or did God create him? We already established God created him. Now, if a person is deficient in his organs, genetically speaking, or physically is deficient, and he then ends up being the pariah of society, then I think that's where a lot of society goes wrong in condemning individuals like that. Because that individual wasn't created by us, it's created by God. You have to answer is why did God create that individual like that? So this is what we're going to look at, because what did Judaism, what was the view? Because in Deuteronomy 23:17 it talks about the daughters of Israel not being prostitutes. So we can look, and I'm going to now set forth some precedents. And you're going to be shocked, as always, because you don't know nothing about the Hebrew Bible. You think you know the Hebrew Bible, you know nothing about it until I tell you something about it, because it's been hidden. Now, in the Hebrew Bible, there is a story of King David and Jonathan. Do you know that it's been alleged, and many rabbis believe this, that they had relations together? What you going to do with that now? We can't counteract it, but we know the evidence is there. So I'm going to just suggest the evidence is there. You can go look it up yourself later. So it's suggested that King David was very close with Jonathan. What they did behind the covers, I don't know. I can't tell you, but it's been suggested. Number one. Number two, Naomi and Ruth were considered to be lesbians before she got married to the famous Boaz. Yes. This is known by the rabbis. Rabbis in Israel today, they do not condemn homosexuality. They accept it. A lot of the Orthodox rabbis are struggling with it. Liberal rabbis, conservative rabbis, Reconstructionists, all of those rabbis have accepted it. Why? Because they see a flaw. Because they read it and they don't know what to do with it. And I will show you the flaw as well tonight. So the thing is this, that the story of Naomi and Ruth, prior to her being wedded for one night only with Boaz, was considered a story of lesbianism. And this is well known. Anybody who knows anything about that story knows what it is. Now, the rabbinic interpretation, of course, has been to deny, as always they do, to deny and to just hold on to a religious conviction. So a lot of the times what's happening out there, it's not a personal conviction, it's a religious conviction. I myself have worked with homosexuals in the past in England, in the corporate environment, without any problem. They are good people. They are not bad people as you think. They're not going around, molesting everybody. So they have their personal life. What they do behind the closed doors is their business. It's not my business. I don't have a problem with it. My view is, it's not my problem. I'm not going to condemn somebody because I don't sit in the seat of God. So I don't do that. So therefore I treat everybody as best as possible. I think you need to take that same approach. And I'm going to make that case for that tonight. Why? Because I was deeply moved by a film that I saw a number of years ago of a child that was born with female parts. And I saw that was a true story, by the way, of a Muslim family. And I saw the humiliation that child went through as he was growing up in that society, and then how he eventually died. I was deeply moved by that story because it was no fault of his own to be born like that. But he was treated very, very badly by the family. Some of his family members, his father, not by his sisters, but his father especially, and by other men in the society. So I think we need to remove some of the views that we carry because they're prejudicial to society and they're prejudicial to humanity. Reason why I say that, when Obama over here, he legalized homosexual marriage, I said to myself, he did a great thing by legalizing it for those people. Because just as we have legal licensed marriage for males and females, they have their legalized marriage. I mean, UK did the same. UK did the civil marriage where there could be civil partners. So great, that's good. Let them have their civil partnership, because why should we worry about that? It doesn't affect us. It doesn't bother us. They have their way. The Goyim's already had that. This is nothing new. It's ancient practice. So therefore, it wasn't a problem for me as such, simply because it is not something that I control. We observe, we don't control. So, but I'm going to look at, I'm going to come back and look at those two verses as well in the Bible and show you how wrong your interpretations are on those two verses as well. So as I said, that it's it's an issue of conviction. It's an issue where most of the people think that homosexuality was punished in the Bible by God. I would challenge you to that. That is not true at all. You are misreading the scriptures. So I will challenge on that anytime. Because what you're reading is not what it says, and what you're seeing happening outside is not what's stated either. So therefore, we've got to understand that when God punishes people, there are other reasons. Sodom and Gomorrah in point. A lot of people think that Sodom and Gomorrah was a punishment on homosexuality. That's absolutely not true. It wasn't. It was nothing to do with homosexuality. The sin was injustice. Exactly what Israel punished. Israel was punished for injustice. So was Sodom and Gomorrah. The difference was Sodom and Gomorrah were not chosen people. That was the difference. Otherwise, Israel, by the way, also had homosexuality within it. But God didn't punish Israel as hard as He did Sodom and Gomorrah. Because God didn't send sulfur upon Israel, which shows you what? That your understanding of homosexuality is quite wrong. Now, my question was this: who brought homosexuality? So if it was beginning of time, who brought it down here? Who was the first person to enact homosexuality? Does anybody know that?
Fallen angels.
Okay, fallen angels. Anybody else? A different answer? Who introduced homosexuality to humans? How did they know? Because the humans only understood male-female relations from Adam. Lilith, okay. Anybody else?
I don't want to say Adam, but I do.
Okay, don't take a risk. Okay, so Nimrod, okay.
Biggest man in Israel.
So
does that? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can we go above a person in that who?
Yeah, you can.
Hashem.
Okay, thank you. So, who brought the homosexuality? The correct answer: angels. Where did the angels come from? Okay, they came from Hashem. Angels are robots. They'll only do what they're told to do. So they cannot go against God. So the idea that Christianity has portrayed is false. That the angels can rebel against God and they can do this, that and the other. Not true. Angels operate under God. So if they brought homosexual acts, and perhaps this was what they were programmed to do. Do you understand how that becomes now a problem? Means that its source is not even the angels. Its source, that God introduced it maybe as a form of evil, maybe as a form of difference to see how society will operate. Whether people will do that or not, and then God introduced the commandments on top. So who will do it and who will not? So think what you're saying. Because don't always act without understanding what you're acting about. So the source is not what you thought. Now, of course, the Midrash, and the Mishnah and the Talmud, they all speak they all speak against it. But the only problem is this, that rabbis are divided about homosexual behavior today, because it's very little understood why many opt out for it. It's not very well understood. by many of the authorities. So we have a difference of opinion. And so there's a particular case in Israel of a Yemenite rabbi who was in a Yemenite community which holds to the Torah pretty strictly, and their rabbi was of course in this way inclined. He was homosexual, and he hid it. His name was Rabbi Yosef, and then finally he brought it out, and then his community had great difficulty with it, but they accepted him. They didn't kick him out. He stayed as a rabbi. He still is a rabbi today. So he was trying to make people aware that why this is something that he struggled with as well as a growing up adult, but that it's just what he is. He can't help it. He can't change it. So the question is this, that what causes homosexuality? Is it society? Is it something that people learn as they grow up? What is it? What causes it? Anybody has any ideas on that?
Something when they grow up, or just inclined to be that way, or
Okay.
something triggers in their mind.
Right. What do you think?
A demon.
Demon? Okay. Anybody else, like unclean spirit?
It's a spirit, something.
Unclean? Okay. Anybody else for any opinions?
Could it be considered an inclination?
Okay, inclination, right. So I think this is a good answer over here, inclination. So we are all born with the evil inclination. It depends which side your evil inclination falls, good side or the bad side. If your evil inclination is higher, then you may go towards that kind of lifestyle, because you accepted it, because you will fight against it, of course, your evil inclination, but you may not overcome it. So this is one of the things. Yes.
I heard that the X chromosomes and the Y chromosomes can have some effects to nucleic stuff.
Right. I mean, there is a valuation that maybe people are born as is, like that, with, like you said, with chromosomes. I don't think there's any hard data on it. There's no hard data on it whether that is the case, but that's a postulation. They basically posited a hypothesis that it could be, but so far as I know, unless it's changed, there's not been any data presented. Hard facts on the ground haven't been presented yet. It's just a thought process. Yes.
I had written not long ago about the transgender.
Oh yes, you did.
And part of it that I put in there is that the male Y chromosome,
Right.
and the female the X.
Right.
Okay. So even if a male
Right.
takes upon themselves the female
Right. Chromosomes.
role or whatever,
Right.
the Y chromosome is still there.
Right.
So
For the male.
So from the DNA, even though you may see a female,
Yeah.
it's still a male.
All right. Okay. So basically what you're saying is that they could still carry the male chromosome, but not necessarily be male, but they're still a female. Right. Okay. So the thing is that I'm going to suggest that there are some things that are just beyond our control, as far as humans are concerned. Of course, as Israel, we would like to be squeaky clean, but it's not always 100% entirely possible to do so. But we like to be. If you go to Christianity, they want call everybody that's homosexual, condemn everybody. They want to hold placards. I don't approve of that. I don't say they go hold placards against homosexuals. If they want to do that, let them live their lifestyle. The no-hire laws we spoke about yesterday, and I told you yesterday that they use that adultery clause, that it says that they can decapitate people, goyim, who are into homosexuality, because they consider that adultery. So if they really applied that law, they'll be picking up homosexuals on the street and beheading them. So I don't think I want to be part of that either. So yes.
There is such a double standard when you talk about Muslims and homosexuality.
Right.
Because they practice homosexuality with children.
Right,
and
you're right.
Molest and rape children.
Right.
And it's not publicly known.
Right.
So I have a question about that.
Sure. The thing is that he's right, that in Muslim societies homosexuality is practiced, but it's under the covers. It's not really broadcast, and I would even suggest that the Quran speaks about it as well. The Muslim holy book speaks about pubescent boys, very good looking boys in heaven. So one of the questions was that I questioned is, what are pubescent boys doing in heaven for males? So I feel that they were as an attraction to homosexually inclined Muslims in Arabia. So when Islam was presented to the Arabians, they were basically enticed with that when you die, you will also get your reward, etc. So however, I'm not saying that what's right and what's wrong, because that judgment will be decided by Hashem, the God of Israel. Ultimately, Yahweh will decide the judgment. But what I'm saying is the actual cause leads right back to Hashem himself. He allowed it to be on this earth, whether he allowed it as a test, whether it allowed it because of human weakness, or whatever, evil inclination, whatever way you want to put it, it was placed here by his authority. It didn't just appear out of nowhere. Humans didn't know what the heck homosexuality is. So, when the angels came, we didn't know how to make weapons. They taught us how to make weapons, how to make war, how to kill people, how to do bloodshed, and they taught us homosexuality, and they taught us the knowledge of the stars and other things that we have in our society today. So therefore, I would be inclined to say that I would not take a view on it. I would say that amongst the Israelites, we obviously have to be aware what homosexuality is, what transgender is, and what other things are. Lesbianism is never mentioned in the Bible. It was never seen as a sin or a transgression ever, although we know that takes place today as well in society. So I think that we need to take a lateral view of a more mercy side rather than a condemning side, because condemning people, you're not going to get nothing. So let God be the judge. That's my view, is that we have to allow God to make the judgment, and we just simply run our families as best we can. Yes, sure you can.
The state of those angels that fell.
Yes.
Were they in a rebellious state against the Creator, or were they opposed their belief on humanity?
If you believe Christianity, then they were rebellious.
Okay.
If you believe Christianity.
Okay.
And if you don't believe Christianity, then no.
Okay.
No one can act against the authority of God. Yes.
My question is, if those angels are programmed,
Right.
then how can they, if they're programmed,
Do you understand
not to go against God?
Right. Do you understand artificial intelligence?
Yes.
Okay, in artificial intelligence, a robot is programmed with a certain set of commandments, that he can do. But then the robot can also learn from his surroundings. He can pick up, if he sees a woman picking up a cup, then a robot can learn to pick up a cup. So he learns as well. He's within that program. So the robots are like that. They're programmed. And so they can do what exactly God told them to do, and they can learn from their surroundings as well. So when the angels come over here, they can see humans procreating, and they can see it. So they can act on that, because they learn it.
But if they brought it, then how did they learn it?
Right, so if they brought it, they didn't learn it. That's the whole point. They didn't.
Already programmed into them.
Right, it's already programmed into them. So what people don't want to face, unfortunately, the reality is this, that we don't want to face harsh truths. We don't admit it. We say, no, it can't be God, it's got to be us or somebody else down here, some conspiracy theory. Maybe it's the Illuminatis that did it. Maybe it's the UFOs that did it. We never want to admit it. Reality is this, that it came from God. Just as marriage did. Sure.
So, in all that is being said, that we have to look at it in this light, that God is incomprehensible unto humans.
Yes, He is. He is.
Because He said there'll be evil in the city, not our culture.
That's right.
So, homosexuality and
We don't.
my eyes and everybody's eyes in here is evil. So
Right.
who caused it? Go back to the same thing he said. Who caused it evil?
Right.
Our
Right.
sin caused it evil. So God is incomprehensible unto man. He beyond our thoughts. We can't even comprehend who he is.
Right. But when God calls something evil, He doesn't call homosexuality evil. Doesn't. He calls something else evil, which I will explain to you later. I think that most people haven't understood it. That's the problem. You were just taking the view of Christianity. Most people, if I say I came from Islam, I took the Islamic view saying that, oh, homosexuality is bad, it's wicked. Then, if you came from Christianity, you take the view that Christianity gives you homosexuality is bad, is wicked. And so we've all acted on religious views, not on gnosis, not on knowledge of Scripture, what the Hebrew Bible says. So we'll look at that, we'll examine that. And so, one of the, sure.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go on.
Okay, now I wanted to ask because when I read one of the books, the Father put the nation down, He wants us to procreate,
Yes.
to make more of the nation.
Right.
So,
Right.
like when you say, I know it's not, if we're not supposed to judge another person
Right.
on what they do. That's
Right.
not our job.
Right.
But if it does take away from the male authority
Yeah.
within
That's a problem. That's a separate issue, though.
Yes, sir.
That's a separate issue. We'll deal with that side, but what we're dealing with right now is the source of the problem. Why, if God gave that problem, then why did God give that problem? Of course, we're not sure entirely. We can only pose it. Sure.
Yeah, like we're reading a Tanakh where Hashem tells us He creates evil.
Right. Thank you.
He says, I kill,
Yeah.
I heal, and I kill.
Yeah. So.
And I make alive. Right, and then he'll come back around and tell you that my thoughts are higher than your thoughts.
Yes.
My ways are higher than your ways.
Right.
So we think one thing,
And he thinks another.
but it's
You see, now,
entirely different.
he's right about that. Now, let's look at the evil side. Christianity, when I used to be in the midst of Christians and ask them that very question, that God creates evil, and what they thought about that, and they would say, well, when God says He creates evil, it means that He creates floods and hurricanes, and this is evil. But I would disagree with that. That's not what God says. Evil means exactly that, evil. So,
Is evil inclination created that you may have choice?
evil inclination is created by God, yes. Now, choice is also created, yes. So, evil inclination is there, and so is choice. These are two separate things. So let me give you an example of God's way of looking at things. Let me just see what the time is, so we don't run off with time. So 8:15. Okay. We'll probably have a little break at this point. Maybe a 10-minute recess. Yeah.
Wine in the one.
10-minute recess. Has written, compassion, sympathy, empathy, understanding, these are essential elements of Judaism. They are with what homosexual Jews who care about Judaism need from us today. Modern Orthodox leader Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein is reported to have said that the intensity of Orthodox community's condemnation of homosexuality goes beyond what its status as a religious transgression warrants, and that he feels towards homosexual people criticism, disapproval, but tempered with an element of sympathy. In both the United States and Israel, several groups have sprung up in the last few years that seek to support those who identify as both Orthodox and homosexual, support Orthodox parents of LGBT children, and promote understanding of homosexuality within Orthodox communities and among Orthodox rabbis. These include an umbrella organization called Eshel, the Gay and Lesbian Yeshiva Day School Alumni Association, the women's group Orthodikes, the youth group JQ Youth, the American Israeli group headquartered in Jerusalem, Bat Kol, and the Israeli group Hod, which is for majesty in the Hebrew to English. In 2012, Hod held an advertising campaign against conversion therapies and for self-acceptance of the religious homosexual community in Israel. Online blogs and support groups have enabled many to find other Orthodox LGBT people with whom to share the conflict between Orthodox religious and social norms and LGBT self-identification. Orthodox rabbis Shmuley Botir and Zev Faber have publicly questioned the opposition of Orthodox groups to government recognition of same-sex civil marriages, arguing that although Judaism, as they understand it, does not condone homosexuality, governments should not enforce any particular religious view of marriage, and that conferring civil benefits to committed homosexual couples should be viewed as promoting family values. Modern Orthodox Rabbi Shmuley Yanklowitz declared that the Jewish values of justice, equality, and dignity lead him to support the cause of gay rights and advocate for same-sex civil marriages. So you heard it here that what the Judaism Orthodox view is. So they are saying within themselves that it is not warranted the amount of transgression that we are making it out to be. It's not warranted to do so. In other words, we shouldn't be doing it. In my last job, I worked for a firm, a very high law firm in London, and we actually had an LGBT, like a forum for LGBT people, and we had a Jewish group there, we had Christian group there, we even had a Muslim group there in the company. So the company's policy was centered to equal policy for everybody. They did not lambaste homosexuality or LGBT community as something out of the normal. And I think, to me, when I worked there, I thought that was a good thing. Why? Because they didn't take a harsh view. If you're a Muslim, they don't see you as some kind of radical. If you're an LGBT, they don't see you on the other side of the fence, so to speak, like a fallen down person. So I think we need to think about this, because the reason why I'm bringing this to the fore knowledge is that some of the people that I spoke to in African Israel, some of the children are towards that. Either they identify as lesbians or they identify as homosexual males. So if you're going to condemn homosexuality, then you're going to have to deal with your children. And what you're going to do, if you're going to hold to harsh religious views which are inappropriate, you're going to end up condemning your children wrongfully and ending up being, isolated from your children. You're going to lose your children as a result of your personal views because they are religiously convicted. What I'm saying is that we need to look at it correctly and stop being prejudicial, because number one, homosexuality, as we just discussed earlier, we cannot paint it with one brush. It appears with different people with different sequence of events. Sometimes it might be society, sometimes it might be something personal, sometimes it might be something that we don't understand completely how it started. So there are various ways in which it appears, and none of them are understood very well because there's no studies been done on it. So what we do know is that, or at least what I do know, is that homosexual couples, or lesbian couples for that matter, don't live as long as heterosexual couples. So one could say they have a lot of infidelity as well, more so than the heterosexual couples. And I would probably suggest that, as we were discussing earlier, there is an issue of semantics and gymnastics. And I will talk about the issue of gymnastics probably tomorrow. Is Friday. I don't know if tomorrow is appropriate to discuss plural marriage because we have limited time. Maybe I think Shabbat might be appropriate for that. So I may do something else tomorrow. But having said that, I think one of the issues we're going to deal with is gymnastics. A lot of people play scriptural gymnastics to make something or condemn something. So there'll be, if you're against polygamy or polygyny, if you're against polygyny, I've seen a lot of rabbis from Christian movement and from pseudo-Jewish movement condemn polygyny as inappropriate and not condoned in the Bible. You see, that's what I call scriptural gymnastics. They play gymnastics with verses. Oh, this verse means this word says that, so they play gymnastics with that. The gymnastics are not warranted because it's in the pattern. And I will talk about that when we come to plural marriage as a subject. But right now we're talking about homosexuality, and so let me present you the evidence to say why I feel that Scripture has been mishandled, misappropriated, misrepresented, and misunderstood. So, if you have if anybody has the HTHS Tanakh or Torah, can you please read Leviticus 18:22 if you have the latest one? If not, I will read it. I'll find it and read it. Or if you have one, you can pass it to me and I can read it for you. Yeah. 1822, if you could read that, please. 2013.
Leviticus 18:22.
Yes.
You shall not lie with men as with women. It is an abomination.
What's the verse before that?
21. And
Yeah.
you shall not let any of your offspring be put through the fire for Moloch.
Okay.
Neither shall you profane the name of your power.
And the verse before that?
I didn't quite finish, Coach.
Okay.
It says, I am Hashem.
Right.
And then verse 20. Moreover, you should not lie carnally with your neighbor's wife, and defile yourself with her.
Okay. And verse 1 of that?
And Hashem spoke to Musa, saying,
Just that? Okay. What about, go back to the where the book starts, Vayikra, chapter 1, verse 1. Read just that one line, please.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Chapter 1, verse 1.
Okay, chapter 1, verse 1.
1111, yes.
And Hashem called to Musa and spoke to him out of the tent of the appointed time, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, I'm sorry, I went on to verse 2.
Right.
Verse 1.
That's okay. You can go to verse 2 as well. So first verse says, Hashem spoke to.
And Hashem called to Musa and spoke to him out of the tent of the appointed time, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, Any man from you bring an offering to Hashem, you shall bring your offering of the cattle, even of the herd and the flock.
Okay, thank you. So what does Musa or Moses, or Moshe, if you want to call it Moshe, what does he represent to us as a people?
Savior.
A savior, okay. Anybody else? Just a brief summary. What's he to us as a person?
Priest.
A priest, okay. A high priest. Anybody else? The lawgiver. Thank you. So what does a lawgiver mean?
He instructs.
He is the Torah. Moses is the Torah, right? So so the first person that we go to if you want to get Torah instruction is Moses. In other words, Moses is the embodiment of Torah. If what we have written down there, that's Moses. So so when you are referencing your 5 books, you're referencing Moses. Don't think that you're referencing God because God gave it to Moses. God asked you to go through Moses. So Moses will remember for all generations. So having said that, if it's been instructed to Moses and then it tells you children of Israel, Moses always referenced first. So Torah is the embodiment of Moses. Then Moses, through Moses, is an embodiment to the children of Israel. Right? So we now have a community that God established and said, this is my community of people. And then God starts speaking, and then we pick up that verse, Leviticus 18:22 and 20:13. Actually, Leviticus 18:22, if you look carefully, it doesn't actually talk about homosexuality. Look very carefully what it's telling you. Read it again. It's not even using the verse for homosexuality. This is what I said is misunderstood.
Leviticus 18:22.
Yes.
You shall not lie with men as with women. It is an abomination.
And the previous verse, if you note, now the word abomination, it's a translation that I had to go back and correct, because that word was incorrectly translated in the first edition. So that's no longer translated like that. If you look at the latest Tanakh or Torah that's out there, the word is translated quite differently. It is, let me pull it up from my PC. Okay, so the latest edition, the 6th edition, would say something like this. Let me take you to that. It says, okay, here it was the latest translation. You shall not lie with men, as with women it defiles ritually. That changes everything. Yeah, the latest edition says it defiles ritually. It doesn't say it's an abomination. So, because what happened was that the verses were mistranslated. Whether it was agenda-based or not, we don't know. But that's what happened in the past. Okay, and so as I've said it in there, in my translation, as I said it, that the ancient jurisdiction of what's considered homosexuality today applied to temple prostitutes, male prostitutes, not to homosexuality in general. So you're quite wrong to read that it applies to homosexuals. It doesn't. So this is why I had to change the translation in about 134 verses, because all those verses had the King James version of abomination, which is not the intended idea of God. When it says ritually defiled, it means ritually defiled. How does it mean ritually defiled? Because it's talking about placing two males as homosexual, as people who would do homosexual acts in a temple setting or a tabernacle setting. That's why it says ritually defiled. So, and then the verse before that was talking about offspring. In other words, God said, generically speaking, if you're going to allow men to act as male prostitutes, then it's going to set the wrong precedent for male and female relationship. Because then people are going to mistake this as a norm rather than the exception, and they're going to go for that, and then you're going to lose your offspring. Hence why in the book of Bereshith, Genesis, the very first commandment to mankind was to go forth, multiply. That's why the commandment was issued, predating the Leviticus Vayikra commandment, because God knew what was about to happen. So therefore, this is why the rabbis struggled, because the rabbis some were for it, some were against it, they didn't know what to do with it. And so, as I instructed you, that the Yemenite rabbi was an orthodox rabbi. He wasn't liberal, he wasn't conservative or a constructionist who take a little liberal view. He wasn't liberal. And so his stance was exactly what my stance is, but actually I've made it even more clearer than he did. He didn't say it was a ritual defilement, I said it. Because that's how it should be translated. Because when you have a male-female in a relationship, it doesn't ritually defile, because God stamped it. But God did not stamp male-male, but doesn't mean that God condemned it either. He didn't. He only condemned it in the setting where two Israelite males will appear in a temple setting. That wasn't permitted. Everything else, nothing to do with the Most High. In other words, he didn't condemn it, he didn't not condemn it, he is neutral. That's why I said that all of you got your interpretations on Sodom and Gomorrah wrong. Because you viewing it with a Christian mindset. You need to remove that mindset. Because even those that understand Hebrew don't view it like that. So quite clearly, we are all really looking at the subject, what it actually means. It doesn't mean what we thought that it meant, because King James translators used that word abomination because they didn't have a better word for it back then. So they used that word everywhere. Where the word taiva was, they used that word, which was wrongly translated. Yeah, go ahead.
So how would you kind of like describe a temple setting then? So just explain that.
Well, let me explain it to you, because this is a problem, you see, because a lot of you, I encourage you to travel. And you need to travel, because if you don't travel, you can't stay in one state. Now you just ventured out of one state to another state, perhaps. Maybe you've been to other states as well, so you're venturing within America. That's not good enough. You need to do more than that. You need to venture out to China, to India, to other nations, to see how cultures function. The reason why I said to you that it's imperative for rabbis to travel, so the rabbis can see what is going on in other cultures. One of the things that happens in India is we have female prostitutes in temples. You probably haven't even seen that in your life. So you need to go look what they do and how they do it. Then you can understand why the Torah had a prohibition against male prostitutes. Without looking at that, you can't sit at home and say, oh yeah, homosexuality is bad. We know nothing about it. Go look what's happening outside. So also homosexual people were present in Roman temples in the past. That's why God said, this is not to be permitted in my house. But it was happening in other houses. So therefore, it's not what people have thought about it. The two verses that you read are both in the context of a ritual, temple ritual. That's the context. It's not a context about America, Great Britain, France. No, it's not. Nothing to do with the Goyim. It's to do with us, homosexuality within us, bringing it into a temple setting. That's what it's about. And so you will notice in the book of Judges, and especially in the book of Kings, where homosexual type of people were driven out. They were never killed. So if you read about King Asa, it says he drove out the Sodomites. Actually, that's not an accurate translation, but that's something that I'll have to look into as well, whether we should change that or not, because it's not quite accurate. I believe if you look at 1 Kings 14:24, if you can read that one, we'll look at that aspect as well. If you just pull up 1 Kings 14:24.
No, I have 5th edition, Kohen.
Yeah, that's fine. Just read it from the 5th. Okay. See what it says. Because I may need to look at that as well. Again, that's a bad, that translation needs to be looked at, because I don't think that it's an accurate way to translate that word that's there. I may need to look at that in my 6th edition.
14?
Yeah,
14?
24.
And there were also male cultic prostitutes in the land, and they did according to all the abominations of the nations.
Right.
Hashem cast out before the children of Israel.
Okay, thank you. So that's at least accurate. It tells you male cultic prostitutes. That's how it should be translated. So most of the Bibles, it just says sodomites. That's not accurate.
So abomination again has to be changed.
That's already been changed in the 6th edition, because it says it's ritually defiled. So from that it leads to one question: what does ritual defilement mean? You should be asking the question, what does it mean, ritually defiling? So today, most of the Hebrews in America or other countries of the world, like in Britain maybe, in Europe, they don't even know nothing about ritual purity. So that means that God had a extreme view on ritual purity. This is why I said to you that not only graveyard, but also we need mikvahs. Remember when I made a statement on Pal Talk that more than synagogues we need mikvahs for ritual purity. Why? Because that is more of a mitzvah than setting up a synagogue. It's more mitzvah to set up a ritual purity, a place for ritual purity, because when a woman at the end of her monthly cycle goes to have a mikvah, and then she goes back to her husband for a relationship, if she begets a child, she will beget a right ruling child. Today, your children are unrighteous. Why? Because none of you know anything about purity, and your wives are not, purifying themselves. Unless they started to do it with a bucket mikvah, if they're not doing that, then they are ritually being defiled still. They're still in defilement after the onset of monthly, and when it finishes. That means they should be doing something. They should be doing a ritual mikvah at the end of their onset of that monthlies. If they're not doing it and you produce children, then you're still acting ignorantly, because you're going to produce unrighteous children still. Don't complain tomorrow and say, oh, Bimon, my child, my son, my daughter, don't listen to me. Part of the problem is you and your wife. You didn't do the right thing. So how can you then lament against the children? Go do the right thing first. So you should be instructing your wives, if they are childbearing age, that they should be doing a mikvah at the end of each menstrual period. If they're not doing that, then you likely to produce an unrighteous child. It's a 50-50. It's like a toss, heads or tails. Is that child going to be right or wrong? So this is something that definitely needs to be looked at. This is why I said that's an issue of ritual purity. So God takes a very different view to ritual purity opposed to what we think. Because in the ancient times, ritually impure people were not permitted to enter the most set apart site, or even the set apart site. So there was the Kadosha Kadoshim, the Holy of Holies, and there was just the holy place for the priests. So none of those places are permitted to Israel if they are ritually impure. Hence why the injunction against Levites not to go to graveyards, because it defiles. It ritually defiles. So because a graveyard has corpses and they ritually defile you, and then you are defiled, you're not allowed to go. So this is something that is still not discussed openly, but it is actually a problem. It carries spiritual ramifications. I don't think many people understand that. This is why I had to change the translation of the word taiva, because it didn't mean abomination. It meant ritual defilement.
Question. Okay, so it means ritual defilement. And so if a homosexual couple, they did their thing and they became ritually defiled, how long does that ritual defilement last? Is it a 7-day?
Right.
Kind of like
I think the rabbi that was homosexual in Israel, Rabbi Yosef, he basically said that I'm still keeping the Torah. I'm keeping kosher laws. I'm doing everything else. Ritual purity. I'm keeping all of those laws. So he basically fought for that it's the same. 7 days or 3 days or till sunset. He said it's the same. So he was fighting for that I'm not a goyim. I'm not out there, doing my own thing and I, live my life as a goyim. He said, I'm still living my life as a Jew. I still keep the kosher laws. I keep the Sabbath. But this is something that I am. I struggle with it. I can't change it. And he said, I've been to therapies that don't work. There's no therapy for it. So he basically argued for the case, and I'm reading a case here that says Jewish renewal is a recent movement in Judaism which endeavors to reinvigorate modern Judaism with Kabbalistic, Hasidic, musical and meditative practices. It describes itself as a worldwide trans-denominational movement grounded in Judaism's prophetic and mystical traditions. The Jewish renewal movement ordains people of all sexual orientations as rabbis and cantors. And in 2005, MIGHTY Kohen became the first openly gay rabbi ordained by the Jewish renewal movement, followed by Chaya Gusfield and Rabbi Laurie Klein in 2006, who became the first two openly lesbian rabbis ordained by the Jewish Renewal Movement. In 2007, Gelda Rebling, born in Amsterdam and now living in Germany, became the first openly lesbian cantor ordained by the upon the sisterhoods to hold informative programs about the transgender and bisexual communities. And it goes on that in 2009, Sidur Sha'ar Zahav, the first complete prayer book to address the lives and needs of LGBTQ as well as straight Jews, was published. Publisher J. Levine Judaica and Sha'ar Zahav is a progressive reform synagogue in San Francisco. And it then says that in 2014, the CCAR joined a lawsuit challenging North Carolina's ban on same-sex marriage, which is America's first faith-based challenge to same-sex marriage bans. In 2015, this last year, Rabbi Denise Eager became the first openly gay president of CCAR. So you have a lot of Jewish rabbis, male and female, that actually ascribe to that view that it's actually not abnormal. So these are not people who are ignorant of the language or the culture of the Hebrew people. They're not ignorant of that. Yes.
My question is, when you was reading that earlier, a couple places back, you was talking about the view that Hashem had about the confusion with the parenting and stuff. So
Yeah.
from what you're saying and what I'm addressing is that Hashem is not against secret acts, but he's against the public manifestation of it
Right.
that brings confusion.
Right, yeah, right. You're right. So that's another interesting point, is he against secret acts or is he against public acts? So like what I was saying to, somebody asked me about something and I said that, to do with the husband and wife in their private house, and my answer was that what you do with your wife and husband, or what husband and wife do behind private house or behind closed doors, is their business. It's not for rabbis to comment on whether it's right or wrong. So same way, if two homosexual couples, decided, or a lesbian couple decided to do something behind closed doors, it's their business. It's not our business to know or condemn or judge them or put them down or get ready for the stoning session. It's not our business. So as I said, that our business in the ancient times, which we currently don't have, was a temple, the tabernacle, where we were not permitted to publicly display it. That was the issue. It was a public cultic issue, not a homosexual issue as most understand it today. It's misunderstood. So because it was a cultic practice, the nations practiced it, they displayed homosexual acts in their temples. That was the problem. The problem wasn't homosexuality, it was the public display of it in a setting of a holy site. That was a problem. So we need to get our views correct. And also you will notice in the Hebrew, the word really, the wording is generally mankind. Generally in the Hebrew Bible, in Leviticus 18:22, it doesn't say ish or isha. It's using a word, different words, using a word for mankind or womankind, and it's giving you a breakdown. It's not condemning individual people for homosexual acts as most have considered or thought in the past. So we need to address that view, because one of the problems you're going to face, like I said, is that some of you are already dealing with your families, and some of you are going to deal with your families in the future when that happens. Then you're going to be like, what are you going to do? Condemn your children? Put them aside? Ignore them? You can't do that.
Question. So as far as the relation is concerned, these two homosexuals, they have the relationship or marriage, whatever it is.
The marriage that's just a recent thing. That's just a civil. Don't confuse marriage. When I said that I was for civil partnerships for LGBT community, it was because it was a goyim thing, and it was because it allowed them rights which were not allowed previously. So that's why I was for that, because the goyim are allowed to do that. We, on the other hand, were not permitted to allow public display of homosexual relationships. That was our issue. Our issue is not homosexuality, but the display of it in public. Secret what happens, we don't care. That's a view that is taken by Israel. Now, it wasn't openly condoned in Israel, in ancient practices. It wasn't openly condoned, but believe me, it existed all across Israel. In our homes, it existed, and you don't read much about it. So when you read about King Asa driving out homosexuals, or sodomites as it puts it in the King James version, that's a bad translation anyway, but it's saying cultic practices, just like the HTHS said, cultic prostitutes. In other words, if our people were acting as cultic prostitutes for other temple sites, not for our temple, because it wasn't permitted. We didn't allow it. But what if they were doing it for another temple site, like for like a heathen temple? They could do that. So God didn't allow them to even do that. That's what God was against. Yes.
Is that kind of like when Yaakov was walking with his friend and the temple prostitute was out there? Is that kind of like a case of when they had temple prostitutes back then and how that stuff
Yaakov
worked?
was...
when he was, I think he was walking with his friend and, yeah, he was walking with his friend and...
What verse are you talking about?
I think it was supposed to have been Judah's wife. No, it was Judah. Yeah, Yahudah.
Judah.
And he was walking with his friend, and the temple prostitute was in there. I guess she was outside.
Ah, okay, Tamar. Tamar.
Yeah, Tamar.
Yes. So the other practice that was prevalent, which I just gave you, the Indian practice of temple female prostitute, that still exists in India. That's what he was. So he thought that she was a temple prostitute, right? Notice that he was willing to have intercourse with her.
Yeah, that's what.
Right?
Like.
What does that tell you? Think about it. It tells you, but it tells you that he was no stupid idiot. You know, he was a judge. He was a judge of the Beit Din. So a judge of the Beit Din goes and has sex with a temple prostitute because, you know, we're told the angels pushed him towards it. Right? If angels pushed him towards that door, he kept moving away and they kept pushing him in, so that he must have that relationship. Then what does that tell you about the Most High?
Yeah, because when I read it, I was thinking to myself that it wasn't like he got condemned for it. It was kind of like that was overlooked, but the problem was that was supposed to have been for the woman was supposed to have been for his son.
Kept for his son, right?
Yeah.
So it was a double-fold issue. It was an issue of that was supposed to be a levirate marriage, you know, plural marriage. That was meant to be for the son. He didn't want to give the son because he took the view that perhaps that woman, there's something wrong with her. 2 of my sons are dead. He didn't know they were doing anything lewd. You know, he thought they were okay because the father didn't have news that they were masturbating. You know, he thought my sons are great, but then suddenly 2 sons are dead. Right? Very few fathers will condemn their children with their sons. Concerned, believe me, very few fathers. In I don't know about American culture, but in male-dominated societies like Muslim societies, probably Jewish societies as well, you will not find high condemnation of sons. It's not done. Usually the daughters are condemned more for issues. Sons are condemned the least, so they tend to get covered up. So to Judah, Yahudah, his sons were great people. Suddenly they're dead. What happened? This woman did something to them. So he was withholding his son. He didn't wanted the third one to be married to her. That's why he was withholding. But then she was instructed to go and wait for him. So the relationship of those two were permitted. Because one of the things that people struggle with is that how could a sister-in-law or a daughter-in-law, have relations with the father-in-law? That's one of the things that people struggle with, and they use the Torah to say, well, the Torah says this. But there's a problem in understanding again. She was no longer the daughter-in-law. The man was dead. The relationship was finished. So when the relationship was finished, a relationship only stands till the person is alive. In other words, if the son was alive, then she is a daughter-in-law. If the son is dead, technically you might say she is daughter-in-law, as we say it, but really there was no relationship left. The son had died, she had gone away, and so therefore she was waiting for the next son to be given to her in marriage. That didn't take place. So therefore she was permitted to be with the alleged father-in-law, who wasn't really a father-in-law at this point. He was just another man. But he had a contract obligation where he was supposed to offer his son and he didn't, and so therefore he himself was permitted to this woman, which is very hard for people to understand. And a lot of people struggle with that because they don't understand how it can happen, but it can happen because it's next of kin issue and it can do that. So hence why, so my point is that everything centered around our tabernacle and our temple. So things that happened outside of that were sometimes ignored by the Most High and even not talked about. So this is not to say that Israel's society didn't have homosexuals. They did. They had them. But they were in the closet, so to speak. They were never spoken about. As I just told you, the rabbis believe that King David, whether for right or for wrong, they believe that it insinuates that he and Jonathan had relations. They don't tell you how far they went, but they say to you that Jonathan openly kissed him and this, that, and the other. Well, make of it what you like. You know, it does. The Hebrew Bible does say that. I don't know how you're going to get around that one. You just can't. You know, I heard about this. I heard about this about maybe 10, 15 years ago, and somebody brought this to my knowledge, and I was like, okay, that's fine. I don't know particular issue with that.
Cohen, but couldn't you have been like brotherly though? I mean, just like.
Well, yes, I like to believe that it's brotherly love, but it could be between two homosexuals too, or bisexuals for that matter. I like to believe that.
That's along the lines of the question I was going to ask was, when it comes to that, I mean, as far as we talk about plural marriage,
yeah,
in the homosexual community, and I know it's not supposed to be marriage, but it's something that they're doing behind closed
just a civil partnership, like a legal paper.
Okay.
Right. Remember the contracts that you get from society at large. What does the actual license mean? Let's look at the license, marriage license, and the civil partnership. All the civil partnership does, it just says that, you know, two people are sharing a home together. They are technically married according to their law, and they have rights with each other. That's all it basically says, right? It's making it lawful for them to claim property or other things. That's basically what it's doing. Now, in the marriage, when you go get a marriage, and most of you have, you know, marriage license, as so do I. So what does that marriage license say? You know what that marriage license says? You're Americans, you tell me, I'm not an American. What does a marriage license say? What does it mean to have a marriage license?
You belong to the government and your kids belong to the government.
Thank you. That's what it says. You belong to the government and your kids belong to the government. That's what a marriage license says. So when the God of Israel gave you the authority to take ketubah, he was saying you belong to me, not to the government. So, because we still had governments around us. Remember, we had goyim around us all over. We had many kingdoms around us. So, you know, easily any Israelite could go on over to another government and said, let me marry under their law, and maybe become citizen under their kingdom. So, God didn't permit that, because he said that you belong to me, you're going to marry under my system.
So, Kohen, along that line, then, we won't be performing any of these type of marriages then.
Homosexual marriage? Homosexual marriages, you mean? Yeah. No, we don't do that. No.
Okay.
No. All I'm saying that as rabbis, we don't do that, but we don't condemn it either. Right. We only perform ketubahs for our people who belong to us, Israel, and the homosexuals in our midst, if there are any under the closet, they can go get their civil partnership, you know. So that's okay for them. In other words, if a person who is inclined that way and has a house or a property or assets, you know, he's worried who's going to take those assets. So if he then wants to do a civil contract, so that basically says that the assets goes to a certain person after his death, that's okay. Let them do that with the Gentile system. Homosexuals or lesbians, we don't do that. We only perform ceremonies for heterosexuals within Israel. So we kind of still stay to the same. All we are saying is that we're not prepared to condemn this as some kind of perversion, because many people do it for many different reasons. We are not the judge of all the reasons in the world. We have established that everybody has a free will, and they have everybody has the evil inclination. So if the evil inclination, let's just say we blame the evil inclination for a second. If we say it's the evil inclination that forces somebody, then let Yahweh judge them, because he gave the evil inclination. We don't have the right to take a life. There was never a capital punishment. Have you ever noticed something that's critically missing is that we never executed a homosexual couple in Israel. Have you noticed that? There's not a single mention of it in the Hebrew Bible. Why not, if homosexuality was such a bad idea? If everybody was against homosexuality in the ancient past, why didn't we execute a couple? Why didn't we find two people and execute them? We know that it existed in our midst. The Tanakh talks about it. The reason why it wasn't done, because the view that most people are taking today is a Christian view. That's why. Christians corrupted people's mindsets. And Judaism struggled because the Khazari converts and the Yemenite converts, they struggled with the view because they didn't see it in practice happening in the ancient times. They didn't see a case. So they struggled with that. They said, well, we don't see a case. How do we deal with this? Unless we see, you got to have the first occurrence somewhere to say, oh yeah, it happened over here. But they didn't see that. And they never took that view that most people take about Sodom and Gomorrah. That most people take today is not homosexual view. So that's something that we need to think about, is that we need to, as rabbis, we need to veer towards what I'd say would be mercy, sympathy. Exactly what Rabbi Jonathan Sachs said, sympathy towards people who are struggling in that area, because I know that some people who were into that lifestyle, they struggled greatly. It wasn't like they didn't try to come out of it. They did try to come out of it. They just couldn't come out of it. They struggled with it till, they came out of it, then they went back, and they came out of it, then they went back. So there was a struggle going on. So to me, that seems like a struggle between the good inclination and the evil inclination. That's what it seems like to me. Yes.
How do we handle the legal aspect of it? Say, for instance, one of the rabbis here at a synagogue,
right?
And the couple wants to come to the synagogue and worship there.
Right.
What would be our perspective on that legally? Because they have the right to sue us if we don't accept them.
Are we saying regards a homosexual couple, you mean, or lesbian couple?
Lesbian, homosexual, gay.
I would take the view. I'm going to take the view that we don't condemn them. If we had we don't have a synagogue, right now in North America. If we had a synagogue, and I think it's going to be very difficult for us to live in a society, in an American society, and then ban certain people. I think it's going to be very difficult legally, because we could be legally challenged on that and prosecuted against Gentile law. That if we said, you can't come into our place of worship, we're going to have a problem with that. So I think that right now I'd say that the answer is that I simply say that we remain neutral on that aspect, because we haven't come across that. When we come across it, we'll deal with it. So we just have to remain neutral. I'm not going to condemn homosexuality or lesbianism or transgender or any of that, because the reason being that there's lots of things going on in our air, and there's lots of things happening in our water. So I cannot put my finger on it and say the water did it or the air did it. All I know is that what's the source is above. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to have to take a view that we live to the best of the ability within the Torah parameters. And if somebody, let's say, like the Rabbi Yosef that I spoke about earlier, if he says that he's a Yemenite Jew and he does all the Torah, and he struggles with his sexuality, then I think we have to take a liberal view. We have to allow people.
So, but our teaching is rabbis should remain the same, that regardless of what these people's orientation is, how they gravitate,
right,
they still should be encouraged to take an Isha.
Yeah, I would say that. I would say for sure that we encourage them to take Ishas to procreate for children, definitely. We would encourage them but not force them. That I think is a good option, yes.
Along the lines of,
if Ishas are prepared to, if women are prepared to be with them, of course, some women may take the view that we don't want to be with a couple or a man whose orientation is different to hers. But then another woman may be okay with that. A woman might say, I want a child with this man. I don't care what his orientation is. As we know that in our society this occurs. So I think we have to take that view. Yeah.
So adultery, I'm just delving into this. How would adultery be looked at these two people have come together, homosexuals. If they in turn went outside.
Adultery's context is only heterosexual.
Okay.
It's nothing to do with homosexuality. Because homosexuality is never discussed in the Bible in terms of a relationship. It's left open to interpretation. In other words, we know so I mentioned Noahide laws. If you go for the Copart heresy of Noahide, that already determines that homosexuals should be decapitated. I'm saying no, we don't take that view. We take a liberal view. We do not do that. We do not take a view that since we are not the progenitors of the heterosexual or the homosexual relationship, we are basically going to take the view that homosexual relationship is another way of orientation of somebody who wants to do that. Let them, do that. Our view is this, that we're not going to use that. If, two males are together or two females are together, then they go with another male or female. My view is that's not adultery. Because that relationship is never mentioned in Scripture as a relationship. So when the Gentiles come in and say, this is civil partnership, I'm okay with that. It doesn't give me problem to accept that.
So female lying with a female, since
that's never considered a transgression in any way.
Yeah.
Because in order to commit transgression, I'm going to say this, here, hopefully no ladies are present, close to me, there's one. Let me use the most least hidden language possible. So in lesbian relationships, what females tend to do is they will use implements like plastic implements. So plastic implements are not considered legal. In other words, legal meaning that they're not seen in the same light as a man to a woman. So discounted. It's not counted. Rambam, when he came in the 13th century, he postulated a view in Mishnah Torah saying that lesbian relationships are forbidden because, or he said that homosexuality is forbidden because he said that it happened in homosexual marriages, man-to-man marriages. He said it's forbidden because it happened in Egypt. Well, I would disagree with Rambam because Rambam has no evidence to present to say that it happened in Egypt, because look at the marriage license. Let me look at the marriage license. This is even stupid for somebody to even make that comment. If such a person as Rambam should have never made such a comment, because license was not in operation. Mm-hmm. There was no license in Egypt for a marriage. So how could you then say, two people got married? Where's the paper to prove it? Mm-hmm. There isn't any. Even we didn't have a paper to prove marriage. Our marriages were verbal. So this idea of ketubah didn't introduce till much, much later. Our marriage was all verbal before.
What would our view be on homosexuals adopting children?
My view is that let them have children, because we have many children in our society that struggle with, for instance, with the local councils or the local government, and they are very, very mistreated. If a homosexual couple is going to provide love to them and nurture them, let them have them. It's better than them being abused by the local government. Mm-hmm. So that's my view. They should be allowed.
When it says in the sheep, it is not good for man to be alone, and so the woman came. So with that, and also that he wants us to be fruitful and multiply.
Yes.
So with all this being said, it's still that way of lying with a man or a woman lying with a woman still goes against what was originally set in motion.
That's a view. That's a view that, as we were just discussing, that's a view that a lot of people debated whether that was the case. But there's no conclusion on it other than religious conviction. So, like what the rabbi said over there, is that if a person has an orientation to be with a male, or if a female has an orientation to be with a female, then that's the view that they have adopted for themselves. Now, we talked about offspring. We said that he said to multiply. What if a female that is with a female decides to opt for a relationship with a male, maybe for even a short time, like maybe like what happened with Hagar and Abraham, where they had a surrogacy, right, a concubine relationship. So what if a female says to another male, I want your child, but she is lesbian and she takes a child, so therefore she is fruitful, right? By the definition of fruitful. Same thing could happen to a male who takes on a female and says, you can, we can procreate with you and you can give us our child, and she agrees, whether it's for some or whether it's for free. So therefore it removes that objection to be fruitful and multiply. That's the view I'll take. Yeah.
I've read of instances where it's a polygamous marriage.
Right.
And he has multiple wives.
Right.
So it takes time for him to make it
Sure,
okay.
Of course, it would do.
Make it wrong.
Absolutely.
So in the meantime, because it takes so long,
Yeah.
some of the women get together.
Oh, I see, like in those relationships.
Yeah. Some of the women get together because he's not able to go and fulfill his conjugal.
Does he permit that?
He permits.
Then that's within his household. That's okay. As long as the husband permits it and he knows it's not under the secret, under the cover, then that's permitted. Like I said earlier, what they do behind the scenes is their business. It's not for us to comment on that, because that's a family unit. Plural marriage is a family unit, with 2 wives, 1 husband, let's just say, or 3 wives and 1 husband. That's a family unit. What that family unit does behind the scenes is none of our business. How they operate, how they not operate, that's for them and God to determine that. All I know is that plural marriage is allowed, and we will talk about plural marriage when we come to it. And so my view is simply this, that those of the people who want to practice it, they'd have to consider it carefully if they can maintain love, with their first wife, and then also with the second. That's something that they need to consider, because for many of us today, potentially plural marriage might be a stumbling block for various reasons, maybe financial reasons, maybe distance reasons, maybe other reasons. But for others, it may not be a stumbling block, so it's case by case basis. It's not prohibited. So we come back to the same point, that action is not prohibited. It's never spoken about. Scripture is silent. When Scripture is silent, it means that the authority of the day decides. So that's my decision on that. Any other questions on that?
I've got a question.
Yeah.
When it comes to prostitution, when it says prostitution, what does that mean?
I think the word prostitution is a little heavyweight in the KJV, or when it uses the word harlot. Prostitution in context of the Torah means a couple of things. One thing, it means that you as a male or as a female, you can prostitute, where you go with different gods. In other words, gods of the nations. You worship at different temples. Therefore, that's called prostitution spiritually. The other form of prostitution is where a woman takes money from males and does it as a business. By the way, that's never condemned in Scripture. Take note, because some of our heroes went to prostitute. So let's not condemn that either. So it's left open, because it was a necessary evil in our society. And I would say even to this, that although I'm not saying that today people should go to visit local hookers, so to speak, the hooker of Lewisville. I'm not condoning that behavior, because there's problems with all sorts of STDs, sexually transmitted diseases. What I am saying is it has never been condemned. So if somebody goes to the local hooker, as long as I don't know and I don't really care what he does with her, but what I'm saying is that it should be avoided. It should be avoided because of the evil of bringing diseases home. And somebody could say, well, that could happen with plural marriage too. And I agree that it could happen with plural marriage, where you were with your wife, first wife, and perhaps you married a second wife and she had some disease and she didn't tell you, and so you inadvertently carried that back to your first wife. It could happen. So for that necessary reason, I think maybe it's prudent to maybe do a diagnosis, test, so that the male is tested as well as a female, just to rule out that there's no problem. Yes.
There's no transgression for a prostitute selling her body.
No.
So therefore,
It's a necessary evil.
So if the man go and sell his body to a woman, same thing. Right?
It's the same thing. It's a necessary evil.
No problem.
Like a gigolo. It's a necessary evil. Why I say that is that I know too well from the cases I've heard in our society where wives subject their husbands to withholding sex. That's very common in our society today, where wives will say, "You're not having sex tonight with me. You can't sleep with me." What do you think the husband's going to do? If he desires a woman and he has no other wife, what's he going to do? Well, he's got only two choices. Or three choices maybe. So it's an unfortunate necessary evil. When a wife does that, well, let me tell you, if a wife did that and a husband went to a prostitute, then the husband would never be counted guilty. He has not committed no transgression. The transgressions upon the wife. Although it's not transgression generally, but she becomes a transgressor for that, because she objected to conjugal relations. Yeah.
I know you said with prostitution it's sex for money. If there's no money exchange. The sex for money, I mean, basically is seen as an economic endeavor in the Torah, nothing more. So, Samson goes to the harlot, the prostitute, the local hooker in Gaza. It's okay because it's a sexual endeavor, it's an economic thing. That's right.
So it's seen like that, exactly like that. It's nothing more than that.
I got something.
Yeah.
Like in the case of Solomon with all of his wives.
Yeah.
Now we know he
1,000
didn't
wives.
get around to all of them. You know where I'm going with it.
Yeah. Right.
So how is he still married to them if he never has actually had sex with them?
Good question. So we're coming to conjugation basically, or when somebody marries, you see here comes a misinterpretation again. When somebody marries, you automatically think that you have to now conjugate that marriage. Do you know that if you married a woman, you are married as a husband to her without any conjugation? She's still your legally wife. So it doesn't require sex to be a legal wife or intimacy. Even without intimacy, a wife is a wife. Once a woman consents to you, she accepts you as a husband, even if you're 50,000 miles away or you're in Mars, she's still your wife. Because remember, we have seen that people get married at a distance. People get married in jails with women who are not in jails. Mm-hmm. So does that mean that she's no longer his wife in Gentile culture? So halakhically in Hebrew culture, when a woman consents to marriage, and there are three ways to marry, she is legally your wife without any intimacy. So if that woman tomorrow changes her mind and says, "Oh, I think I made a mistake, I shouldn't have married you," then you have to give her a get. Unless she's your pillaged concubine, you're going to have to give her a get, a written get. If she went to a marriage with you in consent, with say the three ways of marriage, which I haven't explained about fully. One way is to marry a woman with a gift, money. You give a woman a gift, and you say that I'm going to give you this batch of money. Here is, a gift for $500, whether that's just $500 or whether just a gift. And you say to the woman, I'm sending you this $500. And that's an extreme example. It could only be $100. Because I'm sending you this $100, and this $100, say to the woman that this, by the way, is my method of taking you for a wife. And my Torah accepts me to marry you halakhically if you accept my gift of money. Then you automatically become my wife without any vows. Then if the woman says, I accept your gift, she becomes your wife. If she says, I reject your gift, she is not your wife. That's one form of marriage. So you can marry like that.
So what if she take your money then and turn around?
Run away. If that's a legal marriage, if she took your money and then 3 days later you can't find her, it could happen. Right? And then you have to give her a get. If you can find her, you have to give her a get. Right? So it depends, on that on the system. Second marriage, as we know, is when the two people come together, in a ceremony, and they get married. That's the second form of marriage. Two people together. And then there's a third way to marriage. So there are about 3 ways to marriage, and this is all scriptural as well. And you could send an agent. Third way to marriage, you could send an agent, like Abraham sent his son Eliezer. He sent his son to marry his son Isaac. He was the agent. He carried the proposal. The other girl accepted at the other end, and the parents as well. That marriage was done, dusted, without any conjugation.
I got a question. Explain the difference between a concubine and a wife. Well, I know that.
They're both wives.
Yeah,
They're both wives.
Right.
In ancient culture, a concubine was a wife, and so was a wife a wife. So one was called Isha and one was called Pelagish. The difference was this: that in ancient culture, Pelagish remained with you forever. She never left you. In modern culture, they may leave you or change their mind or go somewhere else after 6 months, I don't know. But they're allowed to do that. But in ancient culture, they didn't leave you, they stayed. So the difference was what you obligated to. So if you took your Pelagish and said to her that, you're going to wash the dishes in my house and that's all I want you to do, then that's what she will do. But she's not allotted inheritance. So a Pelagish generally is not legally allotted an inheritance, but a wife with a ketubah is legally an inheritor without any writing. So the ketubah becomes the inheritance document, because a Pelagish don't have to have a ketubah. So unless a husband decides to give Pelagish something, which he can, she's not legally, cannot force it out of you. That's the difference. Otherwise she's just a wife like any other wife. Okay, so I think we're pretty much clear on the topic at hand. Any questions regards to homosexuality relations? I would take the view that, like I said earlier, is be liberal with it. Talk to people. If it's your children, if it happens within your families, you can talk to them. And if you find that that's the way they want to go, then you're going to have to allow that. Because problem is this, what I said earlier, is it depends on the evil inclination and the good inclination. What is the higher? Which way the person goes. If it's physical, then it may be the issue with the evil inclination, that it takes them to that side more than to the right side, and that overpowers them. So the evil inclination can overpower a person like that. So it depends on that. And if they, like I said, in an issue of procreation, if it's a son, of course you desire him to have children. So I would say encourage them to take a woman, a wife, or a surrogate mother or something, so that they can produce a son, a child as well. That's important.
So the same thing applies like when you were saying in the book, like when it says homosexuality is a transgression. If they have this type of desire, they should really seek counseling and prayer with elders.
That was the earlier view.
That was the earlier view.
Based on a wrong interpretation.
Okay.
That's no longer the case. The word, the word in the Hebrew Bible, which I've written over here, which is the word toiva. The word toiva does not mean it's a transgression. The word toiva means it's ritually defiling. So if your son was a homosexual, in the ancient times, he would not be permitted to go to the tent of meetings or the temple. He is not permitted to go there because that ritually defiles the area. That's the issue.
Okay.
It's not homosexuality, it's what it does, the effect of it. It ritually defiles. That's the only problem with it.
So as far as ritual defilement, that could even be in a heterosexual relationship.
Yes, it can.
Right? Yeah.
Yes, it can. So this is why in a ritual defilement can occur with many different issues. Like for instance with menstruation, you ritually defile for 7 days. So again, the ritually defiled menstruating women were not permitted to go inside the temple either. So that's the issue we're dealing with. God knows everything. Let's not be God on this earth. God knows everything. So I am not God, you're not God, So we are all people, we have roles to play. I have a Kohanim role, you have the tribes roles. So what we got to do is we got to operate in the interest of Torah, the best possible for our families. All of us are heterosexual. I know all of us are heterosexual. Now if tomorrow somebody turns out to be not, then we have to take a lenient view. We can't condemn people for it. So therefore we can't say, well, we're all, 20 of us are heterosexual and 21st is not, we're going to kick him out. We can't take that view. So we'd have to address it in a sympathetic way. Yeah.
Kareem, is there anything that can be done for that? Like, can you do get a car or something?
I think it can be tried. It can be tried. Because remember, it's God's domain. So we can address it back to God and ask God if He wants to change that behavior. If He wants to override a person's free choice, then God can do that, but we can't do that. So yeah, you could do that.
I noticed with the translation how it was supposed to be translated, how you corrected it.
Yeah.
I noticed how it's another way of them taking us further and further away from the importance of the temple.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Correct. Because the problem is this, that when the Bible was translated by people, it was translated outside the context of a temple. So it allowed the Gentile translators to further us from our origin of worship and how we lived. So, and today we have no temple. So what we haven't really got an argument for temple prostitutes. Because, if let's say, if a man was homosexual in our midst, we got no temple where we're going to, say he's going to be public prostitute, is it? It's not going to happen. So therefore it's a non-issue. It was only an issue at the time of temple. When the third temple will be set, that issue will still be the case then. Then God will deal with it. So my point is this, that by God's hand everything is created. So if God can give a human being a female part, then we should address it back to God. It's not upon us to condemn that couple. There's hermaphrodite, those kind of people. Well, then who's responsible for that? Whose fault is that?
Creator.
Is that their fault as well? That they were born like that? So that's the person I was talking about. The film that I saw was to do with a hermaphrodite. A person who was born with looking like a male but with a female part. And they didn't know what to do with him because they were from Islamic culture. They were, the father openly condemned the child and he said, this is satanic. And the mother, of course, the child was a mother's, and she felt sympathetic for that child and she hid that child so they wouldn't kill him. So he wanted to kill the child at birth. So she saved the child and then kept him, away from the father all that time. So I think the problem is a religious perception. And by the way, homosexuality is very, very rife in Muslim culture. Many practice it. So it's not like it's not there, it's all over the place. Just like in the Western culture, the only difference is it's not public. Here is public. You don't see people holding hands and kissing each other in the street, like you do in San Francisco or New York. It's not public like that, but it is prevalent. The problem is this, that to me, if they keep it to themselves, like for instance, they have their bars and they have their places of, gathering. If they keep it to themselves and what they do over there is their business, it's not my business. What happens behind closed doors, nothing to do with us. So I would take that view, a liberal view, that as long as it's not in my household, I don't have to worry about it. And I just petition that it doesn't happen.
Okay, I got another question for you. Okay, you said 20 of us could be straight. One of us could be homosexual.
Right.
Yeah, what if that one had came in here with his boyfriend or whatever you want to call him? Will we accept him in here or will we kick him out?
Well, remember, we don't do public display of affection. So unless the male friend of that person was also in Torah, because remember, our forte is Torah first. If they were in Torah, then fine, he can sit in our midst and listen as well. But if he was not in Torah compliant, then he wouldn't be able to attend, although his male counterpart could. So as long as our condition is Torah first. If you're keeping the kosher festivals, appointed times of Yahweh, then okay, we are going to overlook that because we allow the God of Israel to determine in our midst. Because we don't have a temple, we don't have a established Sanhedrin, we definitely cannot act against that. And even when we had a Sanhedrin, they didn't act against them. So I think that it would be quite wrong for us to openly condemn them. Because all we're going to do is drive a wedge, and we're going to drive people away further, and then you're going to just have open hostility, slander going on. We don't want that, because it's going to create worse sins than that. And I don't want to, I don't want to have this problem where, we condemn somebody and then they condemn us, and then they say, oh, this group, hates homosexuals, and we have a lawsuit to deal with. Don't want that. So avoid it altogether.
When it comes to homosexuality, these individuals, they don't look at it as a sexual issue. They look at it as a love issue.
Right.
This is who they're attracted to.
Right.
So from their perspective, they're not looking at this.
Oh, no.
That issue. They're looking at this is who I love. Right. This is who I have affection for. This is who I want to be with.
I think this is true, because this is where Judaism also wrestles with that problem. Because they're saying that it's not an issue of open, brazen homosexuality. They're saying these individuals, they have orientation towards same other male individuals, so it's an issue for them for love. Oh, I love that person, and that's what I'm attracted to. So Judaism even has a hard time dealing with that, because a lot of them, as I've just read to you, they are allowing that. They're now opening up and saying, well, it's not something we can fight with everybody. We have to allow some room. There are very small groups of Orthodox that don't allow it. Majority of Israel accepts it. Believe me, majority of Judaism accepts it today. So I think that we would be quite wrong if we put ourselves in the ultra-Orthodox group and said we don't accept it. Because to me, because I worked in an environment with the Goyim and it was accepted, and I saw no malpractice there, with people of same orientation, I think that, we need to allow, for Torah's sake, we need to allow ourselves to progress. For humanity's sake, we need to allow peace. We shouldn't be fighting it.
So, with all that said, in the case of the set-apart land, Israel, and homosexuality going on over there, is that okay with the Most High, would you say, or is because?
Well, it started from there, didn't it?
Yeah.
It started from Israel, and so we're talking about the Goyim lands now. So if it started in Israel and was okay then, like he said, don't bring temple prostitution in. But there were still some people doing it in their tents, but it was never commented on. So which means that it was acceptable in some form in the land. And the people were driven out, as we rightly pointed out in the HTHS translation, was cultic prostitutes, not homosexuals. Don't mistake for under the cover, homosexuals. It wasn't talking about that. So my position is this, that we had homosexuals in Israel, many of them, but they hid it under the cover. And God never brought them out and said, punish them and cast them out. So if God didn't do that at that point, and the priesthood had the power, because a priest could have just, summoned God and asked, what shall we do? And God would say, do this. It never happened. So to me, it tells me that the priesthood took a liberal view as well. They didn't try to condemn people. Because, it was an issue of love thy brother. And that was the issue.
What about bestiality then?
Bestiality is not permitted. Again, in the context of temple worship, we do not do that. It's never permitted. Bestiality is totally different to homosexuality. It's a different matter altogether. And bestiality is never permitted in any context. Because it's, the reason why, It's not the part that is not permitted is not the sexual reason. It's nothing to do with the sexual reason. It's to do with kindness to animals. If you do that to an animal, then you are seen as unkind to the animal. And the animals have been given us for protecting them. That's why it's not permitted. So it's a totally separate issue. I think that we're done dusted for this lecture. I think that we need to deal with this in a subtle manner and in an appropriate manner, so that we don't dehumanize people. Because what's happening is that people are being demonized by this. And they are made to look less than human beings. As much as we hated it when it happened to us, when our people were called 1/5, 1/5 human and animal, otherwise beast, as much we don't want to see other people being, delineated that, I would say. It's my view.
I know, I work in a building where they have a lot of labs, and they do a lot of studies on, rats and other animals and stuff, but they know just about everything there is to know about the physical, anatomy of an animal.
Right.
They're really concentrating on behavioral science.
Right.
And, they have ways where they can make two male species go at each other,
All right. Right.
It seems like that's what the Goyim are really focusing on when it comes to science is behavior.
I see. Okay. Well, we let them carry on. Our behavior is towards the Torah. So, if they don't want to do that, that's okay. That's their deal. Because you see, when I talked about no-hide laws first, I wanted to make sure that it's understood that it wasn't part of us. Because we cannot use something that wasn't part of us to condemn the Goyim. The Goyim have always done certain things, and they'll always do certain things. So we need to, leave that aside. We've got to deal with our families, what they do. That's where the problem is. The problem is that we focus too much on the Goyim and we forget our families. I dealt with at least 2 cases where 2 families where the children, at least one of the children, were predisposed to orientation of male-male or female-female. And I had to tell the person is to leave them alone. Don't condemn them. Because because of the misunderstanding of Christian mindset, it brought misunderstanding and a condemnation from father to, child, or mother to child. And that's what we don't want. Because when you start condemning your children, then where's the love in your children? How can you, to me, right, it's very hard to understand. You produce a child, it takes 9 months. First it's a marriage that costs so much money, then it's 9 months wait, right? And then you produce a child, and then the woman has so much pain, she almost goes from death to life. And she produced that kid, and when that kid grows up, and if he has orientation which appears to be not the norm in society, and then you condemn that person because that's what you've been taught, what society has taught you previously, and so therefore, how can you? Because that's your child. You nurtured that child for 18 years of his life, and now he tells you that his orientation is somewhere else. Then you can't condemn that child. You have to still love him. You're still the mother and the father, and you have to deal with it as sympathetically as possible. That's all I can say about that.
Go ahead. Can you actually expound on the ritual uncleanness part? Not so much in the land, but while we're out of the land.
Right. Well, the ritual defilement is, for instance, it occurs in a lot of different ways. So, for instance, you go outside, and let's say you board a bus or a train. And just before you boarded that bus and train, somebody else, a Goyim, boarded that bus. He was ritually impure. He sat on a seat. He now walked off that street and walks off in the street. You don't know. You don't see him. You go to the bus and you sit on the same seat. You're ritually defiled. You don't even know about it. So therefore, when you come home, you've got to assume that you're ritually defiled. Sunset process. Ritually defiled till sunset. So we all must remember, same with plane seats, if you travel planes. Same with trains, same with boats, everything the same. When I used to travel in the trains, when I used to work in London, and I used to travel in train daily, and so I had to automatically assume that I'm ritually defiled till sunset, because I don't know who sat before me on that seat, whether it's a male or a female, and I would automatically assume they're defiled.
So after sunset, you'd ever take a bath,
Well, right, that, and then also you have to assume it by right, because the nations are defiled, and that's why the God of Israel said, "Do not defile yourself," because the nations are defiled. So this is why our marriage structure, everything we do, is within a predefined narrow limit, because we don't want to be defiled like the nations. And this is something that I don't think people understand, that ritual defilement brings impurity into the home. And although it's not sin, transgression, it can cause problems in many areas of your marriages. It can cause problems in other areas. This is why it should be taken seriously. So, if you're, let's say, if you are ritually defiled and you came and had relations with your wife, you ritually defiled her as well. Right? What if a child was produced from that relation? That child is ritually impure. And so the child that is born, chances are he will be unrighteous. 9 times out of 10. Unless God has otherwise decided mercy on that child. There's no way that child will not be, right ruling. There's just no way. So this is a problem. This is why what we're seeing in our community is a lot of unrighteous children. We're seeing that today. And we wonder, well, I did the right thing, and did you really do the right thing? I asked that question. Did you really do the right thing? Were you, pure? Did you care about purity? They don't even know what purity is. So unless you know what purity is, there's no way you can, not be impure. So it's a real issue. Tumma is a real issue, and Tahir is a real issue of how to remain Tahir or how to be in Tumma. It's a big issue. This is something that I'm trying to instruct people on. Be careful about that, because it affects you spiritually, it affects your relationship spiritually, and it affects our relationship with God as well. Because spiritual defilement may distance us from God. And there's certain ritual defilements that don't matter. Wife-husband relationship don't matter. If you become impure in the process of procreation or intimacy, but what if you're ritually defiled by a goyim outside? Then it does matter. That's my point. So, and we can't control that. I mean, you work in a job where you could be touching vehicles which could be ritually defiled.
I pretty much took the name of Hashem out of my mouth, because I don't know if I'm clean or not.
Exactly.
I get out 10, 12 cars a day.
I know. So until you come home, you got to automatically assume that you're ritually defiled. Until you take your sunset bath, then okay, now that's gone. That your period starts. That's the problem with it. Yes.